I finally reached Path of Exile 2's endgame after a grueling, fun campaign, and what the heck? It is so much fun. I know it's unfinished, but I've been duped, tricked. My soul was laid bare after a completely new experience during Acts 1 through 3 of Path of Exile 2, wherein me, someone with thousands of hours in Path of Exile 1 since 2019, and a total of 2 boss kills across all of FromSoft titles, loved this brand new ARPG experience and feel. It didn't feel like Diablo 4, Path of Exile 1, Last Epoch, or Torchlight Infinite's campaign. Gearing was meaningful, spread across monsters, chests, shops, and crafting. Bosses were engaging, able to be overcome with knowledge, skill, or both. Conquering zones was equally fulfilling, tense but not draining. Yes, currency drops were spotty at first in the campaign. Yes, bosses do reward skill, especially during week 1 when player knowledge approaches 0 in the campaign. Yes, zones are huge and sometimes sparse in the campaign. But even with all the fun I am now having in Endgame, I preferred the campaign to my Path of Exile 2 Endgame experience so far in a few key ways. I know, big statement, let me elaborate. Path of Exile 2's Endgame feels like stepping straight back into Path of Exile 1. I know many might disagree or they might like or love this, but this is my opinion as it currently stands. This video breaks down why I prefer the PoE2 campaign to what I've seen in the endgame so far and my feedback to grinding your games on this choice, intentional or not. As of now, I am breaking into tier 10 waystones on my Lightning Monk. Before we get deeper into the video, make sure you hit the like button if you enjoy my content and to subscribe to the channel for all things Path of Exile 2. Both are entirely free and the best ways to help the channel grow. Thank you. The first stark difference is bossing, or just bosses in general, in the campaign versus the endgame. We move from the campaign, which boasts a new boss in basically every zone, which is fantastic, to the endgame, wherein presently 1 in every 4 zones on average contain a boss, and if you die in the map, you may repeat it to try and clear the map, but the boss is completely gone. It counts as a special encounter, like Breach, or Delirium, or Expedition on the map. The contrast is stunning. Sure, you can try to hunt bosses on the Atlas, but they're still quite rare. I miss fighting bosses like I did in the campaign. They're the coolest part of Path of Exile 2 gameplay right now, and it's a shame I've fought 7 total bosses in 55 total map clears, despite beelining straight for them. I was talking with Havoc last night, and he mentioned that in Path of Exile 2's campaign, especially in Act 1, you are chaining together boss after boss after boss. That legendary chain of bossing from the Mud Burrow to the Graveyard is just beautiful. And I wish I could get that same sort of experience or vibe in Path of Exile 2's endgame. So what is the crux of the issue or the solutions here? Well, obviously grinding your games is trying to make bosses rewarding in the Atlas. They're giving lots of loot to them, they're making them big pops, and they want them to be challenging encounters. Well, as it stands now, as I said, in tier 10 waystones, yes, they are quite rewarding, but I don't think the challenge is necessarily there compared to the other monsters I'm fighting in packs, and especially the mechanics such as Breach or Delirium that I am also encountering in maps. I really wish there was a way perhaps to spec further into bosses, and I mean encountering them more frequently. I know there is a part of the Atlas passive skill tree that allows you to beef up your bosses, but it doesn't cause them to appear more. I would love if they upped the rate of encountering bosses by double. Perhaps instead of in every 1 in 4 maps on average, they're in every 1 of 2. And even though they have these special encounter markers, maybe some bosses just randomly have bosses in them, and you discover that when you go into the map itself. I know they'll need to adjust the loot here probably to make sure that bosses don't contain as much loot if they're going to make them encounters more frequently, but I do really think that's necessary. Bosses in Path of Exile 2 are so great. I just want to fight more of them, and now that I'm in Endgame, I really miss encountering them in the campaign. Embrace how great a job you've done with the bosses. I don't want to only find 1 in every 4 maps with bosses, or really have to work to try to get to all these different maps with bosses and then potentially die and lose the boss. I know that I haven't touched the pinnacles yet, and I'm sure those are phenomenal, but I still think bossing should be embraced. I'm going to do it. I'm going to bring up other ARPGs, including Path of Exile 1. And I know the boss fights are very different between PoE 2 and all these games. But in Last Epoch, there's a boss in every single map in the Monolith of Fate. In Diablo 4, Nightmare Dungeons have bosses. The Pit has bosses. The open world constantly has bosses. In PoE 1, there are map bosses in every map, even though they aren't spectacular fights. I hope Path of Exile 2 reverses course on this rarity of bosses in the endgame and embraces the fights for what they are. They don't all need to be 2-minute fests or anything, which I think is what people were scared of. If you have a powerful character in endgame, as we're about to talk about, you kind of speed through this sort of stuff. I'm still downing T1, T2, T3, T4, all the way up to T8 bosses in about 30 seconds or less, and I am not a hyper-optimized character at all. I don't have great gear. It's all self-crafted, self-bound. Same with the build. I know once we have some hyper-optimizers out there, these bosses are going to melt like that. So please, grinding your games, reconsider what's going on with bosses in the end game, and I think instantly, the already fun Path of Exile 2 endgame experience will feel so much better. The next piece that I need to talk about is the transition from the campaign speed to the end game speed. And you already experienced this in Cruel. When you go through Acts 1 through 3 in Path of Exile 2, it's a very engaging experience. Yes, it's much slower than the usual ARPG experience, but they were going for that unique feel, and I think they achieved that. But as soon as I hit Cruel, I'm not sure if it was a character upgrade that I got. I don't think it was. I didn't get new items or really new power once I get immediately to Cruel. But once I got to Cruel, I was downing bosses in 10 seconds or less, all through Act 1, 2, and 3 without fail on my monk. Now, in normal mode, that was not happening. Boss fights were challenging. Even the final boss of Act 3 in normal mode took a substantial length of time. I had to dodge a lot of abilities. I was running out of flask charges. I had to finagle with my build a little bit to make sure I could keep up that mana sustain. And as soon as I went into Cruel, never had that problem again. Everything was melting. Now, this might be entirely moot because maybe the balance of Cruel is a little wonky, and instead they're not really paying attention to it because they plan on bringing Acts 4 through 6 into the game very soon in the broad span of things. 6 to 12 months is pretty soon. So maybe they're not touching the balance there, and the curve will feel much better once we have those actual acts into the game. But right now, as it stands, when you go from normal to Cruel, you instantly feel way stronger and the game is way faster. And then when you go from Cruel to Endgame, that becomes even more apparent. Everything is very fast. There's monsters everywhere. There's projectiles everywhere. You're speeding all the way through. It feels very much like I stepped into Path of Exile 1's endgame. You even feel that with the loot. I feel like I need a loot filter, and I don't feel like it. I actually got a loot filter almost as soon as I hit into endgame because my first breach, my first expedition, loot was flying everywhere on the screen, clogging it up, and I don't necessarily want to see that. So it's a very jarring experience. And I'm not sure if this is intentional from grinding your games or if it's just because the balance isn't yet there yet and endgame has not been fine-tuned as much as Acts 1 through 3 have been over the past 5 years. It's the newest thing that they've made. It's the least tested thing that they've made. There are a bunch of issues with it that they've acknowledged, such as white monsters and magic monsters one-shotting people out of the blue, and those will be fixed. But I'm more so talking about the intense upping of speed in the game. Lots of people were worried Path of Exile 2 would not be fast. What I'm experiencing right now in Path of Exile 2's endgame is that it's very, very fast. It's a Path of Exile 1 endgame experience with way better graphics, way better feel of something like Melee and the Monk. And as a Path of Exile 1 lover who has played thousands of hours of it since 2019, I am in love and I am enjoying it. I am. But I also can have two thoughts in my head at once. I can hold these two opinions concurrently. I loved the Path of Exile 2 campaign and thought it was a unique experience, and I was excited to see how that transitioned from the campaign all the way to Endgame. And I didn't experience that. I saw an uptick in power very fast, and it didn't feel like I earned it in Cruel. And then I saw that once again when I hit Endgame. And like I said, I'm not in T15s yet. I'm not super juicing or the like, but I feel like everything is just moving at the speed of lightning. And I'm curious to see if that's going to change. Let me know your thoughts if you are in the end game. Did you see this sort of progression? This might be a me thing once again. I'm on the Monk. I'm going to try a different class pretty soon to the end game. But on the monk, I just felt like I progressed super fast. It didn't necessarily feel like I earned that progression, and everything sped up at a tremendous rate once I hit maps. Okay, point of feedback number 3, the goal of Endgame once you are in a map itself. Right now, there are exactly 2 objectives for a map. 1, kill all the rare monsters. 2, kill all the rare monsters and the map boss if your map has a boss. I do not necessarily like this format of clearing a map. I understand why it's in the game. It encourages us to hunt out all the monsters and explore the map in full, but I'm not a fan of it. And I don't think it's because of the actual finding the rares and killing them part. I think it's because of the 55 or so maps that I've done so far, the layouts all feel pretty darn familiar or pretty samey. Now, the environments themselves are freaking breathtaking. Everything just meshes together beautifully. The music, the art, the monsters. Oh, I have to think about how I'm fighting people still, which is great. It's not as fast as PvE1 because I am still strategically and tactically moving throughout the map, and I love that. Such as this one map which had trees everywhere. I think it's Woodland map. Oh my gosh, what a diverse and different environment compared to everything else. But the layouts of the map seem pretty samey, meaning a lot of them are big mazes, a lot of them are circular, a lot of them aren't just straight paths, like a canyon from Path of Exile 1, or a strand, or something like the Dreadnought in Path of Exile 2. I'm wondering if I just haven't experienced a diverse set of biomes yet, or if this is the type of design they are going with in Path of Exile 2. So I'd like to speak my mind right now, just in case this is what they're going with, and I'd like to throw my hat in the ring and say, go with a more diverse set. Throw in some linear maps, okay? Throw in, yes, some circular and maze-like maps, but also some wide open maps, like a desert from Path of Exile 1. I think that we need that diversity of layout in addition to the diversity of biome and environment. That already feels good, that latter part. I think if you just work on the former and create those more diverse layouts, it's going to be golden. It's going to be so great because I know the randomization is totally there. I just want to see it in action. And honestly, I do think that there is room to add some different objectives to clearing a map. I'm not really sure what they could be, but rare monster hunting, especially if you miss a rare and you get to the end of the map and the little marker appears on your screen telling you, yeah, the rare that you missed is all the way on the other side of the map. That does feel bad, but how the heck do you solve that without fundamentally changing the objective-based system of clearing a map? That is something that I don't know how to solve. Grinding your games. What do you think? What do people think? Do you guys have a solution for it? Let me know in the comments below. And here is part 4 of the endgame feedback so far, the tower system. So for those of you who aren't in the endgame yet, the towers are monuments on the atlas. It's where you insert the tablets that affect maps in a radius around them. And I did not realize that you actually have to open up the tower as a map, go inside and clear it. It's not just a piece of the UI where, okay, you reach the tower, you insert a tablet in, and it affects everything around. No, you actually have to go inside the map and clear the tile set. However, I think this suffers from a problem from Crucible League from Path of Exile 1, the Forge of the Titans, which I think was a huge missed opportunity. The tower in Path of Exile 2 is a very samey, linear, unchanging map environment with nothing special within besides that reward at the end. There's no randomization, okay? It's not a maze or anything. It's just connecting towers, and it's a beautiful environment, but it feels like the same thing every single time you touch it. And I think there needs to be some randomization added there. And I'm talking about maybe a special encounter at the end, like a boss or a breach or maybe delirium or an essence or two inside of here, instead of just the reward of using the tablet at the end of the map. Doing these 5 times so far has been far too samey because they also have very similar mob types within. It's Val mobs. And I talked to Havoc and he said, yeah, doing these 100 times, I'm not a fan at this point. And I totally agree with him. It makes sense because it's the exact same thing with very little randomization. So when you find these towers, which are supposed to be, it's supposed to be a momentous occasion, I think that there should be something bigger there. maybe a residual of whatever the pinnacle boss is, right? Because these are supposedly connected to that pinnacle boss. So some sort of difficult boss at the end that you can fight in addition to just clearing this very linear style map. Or just like I said, special encounters spattered throughout that would help make each tower feel distinct instead of what it is right now. Presently, those are all of my thoughts on the endgame of Path of Exile 2. I feel like the campaign is quite distinct from the end game, and I know the campaign has been cooking in the oven for a long time, whereas the end game itself is just coming out, okay? I think they cooked it for a short amount of time on very high heat, whereas the campaign has been baking at low heat for many years now. So I think there's a lot that is malleable here and can change based on feedback, and I think a lot of this feedback is warranted in the end game. I'm still firmly of the mindset that the campaign itself doesn't need a lot of changes. There's numerical adjustments there. Everything else to do with it is absolute chef's kiss. You can even do the pure cinema, absolute cinema. It's a great experience, and I hope that more of that feeling transfers to the end game based on the 4 pieces of feedback that I provided in this video. Let me know your thoughts below. Are you having fun in the end game? And even if you are like I am, do you have any points of feedback for grinding your games? And if you're not in the end game yet, are you in the campaign? Are you enjoying it? How's your character doing? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, Exiles. Like I said at the top of the video, make sure to hit the like button if you like this style of content and to subscribe to this channel for all things Path of Exile 2. Both are entirely free and the best ways to help the channel grow. I will see you in the next one, my fellow Exile. Stay sane.